Hello, and welcome to Unsheathed with your hosts, Kyell Gold and Cam Hirosaki. We hope that you enjoy the program. Please stick around afterwards. There'll be cake and blowjobs.
Okay, are we broadcasting people in chat room? Don't be wise ass and say no. Okay, sorry, we have a different setup this time, so we want to make sure that we're doing our thing right. And I think we are.
It looks like we are, so...
We're so professional.
Welcome, everybody. We're doing a different setup because... Oh.
Okay, I need to mute this, I think.
Mute this one. So anyway, welcome to Unsheathed Live number 2. I'm Kyell Gold.
I'm Cam Hirosaki.
And the reason that we're on a different setup this time is because, as some of you may know who have been following us for the past week or two, or have been following me, I've been experiencing some problems, shall we say, with the laptop that normally was our live streaming laptop. But this is good because...
That we had so much experience with.
That we had one whole experience with. It is supposedly being repaired and should be fixed today or early tomorrow, so just a little bit too late to be a podcasting laptop this week.
But that's okay, because I'm a tech-savvy otter to the rescue.
Yes, and this is good, too, because it means that when Cam and I are in sort of different places, we could potentially still pod stream together. Pod stream? Live stream? Live cast?
Live cast? No, podcast live sheet. I don't think we're allowed to put that on live stream.
So, let's see, what else have we been up to?
I'm doing
tell people what you've been up to. I'm going to tweak this.
I'm doing a summer writing project. I'm 2 weeks into it, but basically the idea is that once a week I'm going to try to write a little short story, very short, probably between 2,000 and 3,000 words, just to be in the habit of sitting down, writing things and finishing things, and also having stuff for people to read, because people tell me they like my stuff, and I feel bad that I only have like 2 stories a year for them to read, so I figure giving them an entire summer of stuff to read should make them happier.
And what I've been up to is actually some kind of cool stuff. As I posted about a little bit ago, but I'd spent the entire winter and summer writing, mostly out of position, but also writing the cupcake that's going to come out in September. And it was, by the time I got finished with all of that, which was all around the same time, it ended up being kind of a weird space because I hadn't had any feedback on it, and I had these like huge stories, and for all I knew they were completely terrible. But people have been reading the third out of position novel, and I've been giving sort of pretty nice feedback on it. I don't get official feedback till next week, but a couple people have mentioned it in ways that make me think that it's actually an okay story. And I've been communicating with the artist who's going to do the illustrations for the cupcake, and she is very excited about it. So I feel like maybe a little better about the way I spent my winter and spring, and you guys will get to see those stories in September and then in January. So that and fixing a sick Macintosh is what I've been up to this past week, I think. What else have I been doing? I don't want to say that's it, but I feel like there was something else.
I can't think of anything that would be good for...
I sent off some stories to the cons where I'm going to be, I guess, this fall. Galaxicon and Oakland. And I like those stories a lot, so I'm looking forward to you guys getting a chance to read them. Breachin', I'm going to be at Rainforest, but I'm not a guest, so I didn't write them a comic book story this year. It wasn't that I didn't want to, it was more that I had 2 comic book stories that I had to write, in addition to a bunch of other stuff that I had to do, and I'm not even sure what the theme of Rainforest is this year.
Neither am I, actually.
They've been pretty good at collecting their own fiction. I'm usually happy to contribute stories to them but this year I just didn't have time. I was
Yeah, and cons usually solicit their stories for their books more than just say, hey, look, I wrote you a story, because that's just, well, not all of them. Oh, the theme is Warehouse 13, that's right. Thank you, Atari. I remember that now.
Yeah.
We have a lot
I'm
of...
not sure what that means.
We have a lot of con themes coming out that have, like, fur puns in them, which, like, to me, like, really makes me think of late 90s furry fandom.
Yeah, I'm not sure I approve of that trend.
Yeah, like, we've got Forbidden Planet coming up for FC, and there's, like, another fur something or other. And, oh, look, I have a liquor woozle. Hooray! It's not wine, but it does look pretty gay. No, Moulin Rouge was...
Moulin Rouge was FWA last year.
Well, this past year, rather.
This year.
Yes. That's not very original. I think we're going to have to kick you from the chat, Alien, now. Yeah, also, there's a ton of End of the World Con themes this year, too, because it's 2012.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. I have no idea what I'm drinking, but it's fucking good.
It's getting all in your mustache, too.
I was going to say, I think it's also full of grapefruit, which I'm technically not supposed to drink, but... but that's okay.
What else? What is the Furry Fiesta theme for next year? Did anyone say?
Yeah, I forget.
I think it scrolled up before I could read it.
I would scroll up, but I can't really, like, scroll through the thing without messing up the camera, so I don't want to do it. Oh, Time Traveler's Ball, that's
right.
Yeah. I was just talking about Zapnut the other day. An EpiPen. No, it's not an anaphylactic shock thing. It's... I don't want to get into it. It has to do with medication. I'll be fine. I'm not going to die, don't worry. And besides, just because something's technically bad for me hasn't stopped me from doing it in the past.
It's true. That is even documented in places.
It certainly is.
So... Alright, well, that's our introductory segment. We're going to not do one next week, and the week after I'm not sure about, because Kit and I will be away at a wedding.
I'm away at a wedding that same weekend, actually.
Are you?
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Not the same wedding.
I doubt it.
Okay.
Unless you're getting invited to my family members' weddings.
No, not yet.
I mean, my family likes you and all, but...
your dad is awesome.
Yes, everyone loves my dad.
But since KM can now podcast off his laptop, we may be able to run both of them simultaneously and somehow, merge the streams.
We can figure something out
across the live streams.
I may have to be a bit more politic than usual because I'm staying at my brother's house and he has 2 young children, so I don't want to be too... At least I'll be behind closed doors, or perhaps when they're asleep because they're like young.
Yeah, well, 7 o'clock is 10 o'clock.
Yeah, exactly, and they'll be asleep by then. Actually, I may be flying back on Monday. If you could go on a double date with some of your characters, who would you go out with, and what would you do? I think that means you and Kit.
Double date with some of my characters. Probably it would be a couple of the League of Canids guys, just because I would want to meet some superheroes in real life and see them do their powers.
Yeah, that'd be neat. I like that.
So that also covers what we would do.
Yeah, superpowers.
Show us your stuff.
Why won't I tell you what the KM stands for? Because I'm a jerk.
Yes.
That's pretty much the only reason I won't tell you. Also because it's actually kind of dumb, and I'm a little embarrassed by it. It doesn't stand for anything cool, don't worry. It sounds a lot better as Devin Lee got no love. Devin Lee get plenty of love from each other. Haven't you read any of those books?
I've spent years of my life with Devin Lee.
Yeah. Roland Shard asks, what is your opinion on changing perspectives within the same chapter? As long as you're in a scene break and perspective switching is par for the course for your story, I think it's fine.
Yeah, you have to set it up as something that you're doing in the story.
Yeah.
That's the big thing. If you set it up as, this is a story where we switch back and forth and you signal it properly to the reader,
yeah,
then You can definitely do that. I was just reading through an Elmore Leonard book where it's third-person distant, or third-person omniscient. So, but he does switch perspectives, although I was listening to it as an audiobook, so I can't really tell whether he was changing chapters, but I don't think he was changing chapters every time.
No.
But he would do a scene break, and then he would start with a different character, and you'd be like, okay, well, now we're following this character around, so...
Yes, what if it isn't a scene break? In that case, yeah, if the perspective is really distant and you have just a fluid point of view, then that's one thing, but you gotta be really careful with that, because otherwise it'll just seem like you're lazy, like you can't figure out how to get the point across other than jumping from one character's head to another briefly.
The thing is that you really have to signal it to the reader.
Yeah.
And a scene break is a good way to signal, like, something may have changed.
Yeah.
If you don't signal it to the reader, then you're just confusing them, and why do you need to not have a scene break, is my question.
Yeah. I mean, Thousand Leagues by Other Me, I have character breaks within chapters.
Yeah.
And it jumps, but
you can, if you just want to, don't get too, like, caught up on the idea of what a scene is. Like, you don't have to go through one series of events from a single character's perspective before you can have a scene break. You can go partway through a scene, do a scene break, and then jump back like 5 minutes and cover it from another character's perspective if that's what you want to do. So don't get too tied up in that. The main thing to do, again, is to signal to the reader what you're doing, because if the reader has to stop and try to figure out what they're reading, then they're not getting lost in your story, and they're not enjoying it as much.
Right.
Unless you're Neil Stephenson, and figuring out what the author is doing is part of the enjoyment people expect to get out of your story.
And as we like to advise on this show, you are not Neil Stephenson.
Exactly.
Don't try to do that.
Do not do a Neil Stephenson trick.
Yeah. If I could do it over again, would I have Other You? Technically, if you want to get technical, Kyell Hirosaki is Other Me.
Yeah.
It's, or at least secondary me. Other Me is the real me.
Would you have Other You?
Yeah, like basically, if I could do it all over again, would I have done having two identities?
Oh.
Probably not. It was really frustrating to deal with for a lot of years.
Well, but it was also, I mean, you're in a different situation now than you were then.
I had valid reasons at the time. Some of which involved the fact that I worked for a company that produced a prominent anthropomorphic animal franchise, and I think they would have looked unfavorably on it if they had connected my name on the Google and found animal people sex. That was my second reason. My first reason for doing it was before I worked for them. It was just because I was embarrassed. I didn't want any of my friends knowing that I was writing, like, furry sex. Lauren saying, yeah, they might have. I don't want to say that their IT department was incompetent, but they kind of were. Ridiculous rumor that Kyell Hirosaki is actually Rikoshi in a funny hat. He's actually Rikoshi in a funny hat with fake glasses.
Wow.
Yeah.
Which is cool, actually. I like the outfit.
I like the outfit too. I think which because everyone's like, oh, like the fox plushie needs a hat. I'm like, nobody's saying that the otter plushie needs a visor.
Yeah.
I think a bright green visor is more of a visible. I mean, your hat. Well, also more people know you. More people go to conventions.
That must be a good drink.
This is a good drink. The otter needs a monocle. I don't have it. It needs wine. We don't have wine. We just have liquor.
That's true. Yeah, I've not been very diligent in getting a hat for the fox. I'm not sure I want to go shop in doll stores looking for a tiny fedora.
Alcohol, I asked you a question. Is it standard practice to bring paper or laptops to writing panels at cons? I've seen both.
Yeah,
I think it depends. I mean, like, if it's going to be a writing panel where you're expected to be actively writing and possibly reading it out loud, I would bring whatever you're most comfortable with.
If you want to take notes, bring whatever you're comfortable taking notes on.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think 5 years ago, when not as many people were just lugging laptops around all the time, you didn't see it as much, but, like, Laptops are
and
so
people have
cheap and
tablets
available now.
and-
Yeah, and, like you have like netbooks and mini
iPads and
laptops and.
How were the writing panels at AC Alkali?
Yeah, where Other Me was supposed to be on like 6 of them, but Other Me wasn't there, and I'm very sad.
Yeah, I think more often than not, I see people with laptops at our panels now, taking notes. Try not to make them laptops with really, really loud keys, and if they are, don't do a lot of typing because that can be distracting. Ideally, pen and paper is very quiet, but if you have a louder laptop, kind of try to sit in the back so that you're not making all kinds of noise up front.
Yeah, I can. People saying that other people were sad about me not being at AC. There's like at least like 4 or 5 people whose names I'm seeing in the chat room who I know were there that I wish I could have seen, and I couldn't make it. It's slow to write by hand as opposed to typing. It can be. I know some people who write shorthand and can write by hand super fast.
Yeah.
Granted, at least one of them took professional stenography classes. But
I mean, you also have to. I appreciate that it's slower, but then, take notes. I mean, your other. It's polite. If your only options are be disruptive to the rest of the panel or write notes more slowly, then me personally, I will always opt for write notes more slowly.
Yeah.
You can always sort of get into the practice of jotting down a couple little things to jog your memory, and then as soon as you get out of the panel, go sit somewhere where you're not disturbing people and type out fully all the stuff you remember.
Which is not a bad exercise in and of itself.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like those little memory exercises you used to get in paper.
Remember newspapers?
Oh, yeah.
Remember when those were a thing, Kyle?
Yes. I was a young pup then.
Kyell impersonate.
We will be on a bunch of panels at Rainforest, since we spoke about it earlier.
Yes.
And I think we've each got like 4. I'm going to do a reading. I'm going to have a book launch party there. And for those of you who remember our esteemed guest artist or guest author from last year, the Rainforest staff has informed me that she has not committed to doing any panels this year because she has other sort of personal business, and she may have time at the last minute to step in, but...
The best part is when you say she, I can hear the capital S.
Yeah. I thought there was a question scrolling up there.
Inspired from XKCD, 1 space or 2 after a period at the end of a sentence. Technically it's 1 nowadays. 2 spaces was for typewriting.
Yeah.
Although it's worth noting, and I didn't even know this until a few years ago, that online submission forms will auto-correct it for you. I mean, I have many decades of muscle memory forcing double space after a period for me, but...
Yeah, I managed to break myself of that habit pretty fast. Ilan asks, what's the weirdest source of inspiration you've had for a story? I don't know what you'd count as weird.
Yeah, I mean,
I get my inspirations from life.
Yeah. I mean, nothing, like, that's just, story inspiration all comes from such random places that I don't even know how to qualify weird.
Yeah, I don't know how I would say one inspiration is weirder than another.
Ronnie asked, we have the panel info for Rainforest already before it's even posted on the website? Well, yes, because they're talking to us about what we want to do.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't know when it's going to be, but we're in talks with them about what panels we're going to do. What obvious mistakes do non-drinkers make when describing intoxication? Huh, that's a good question.
I don't know. What mistakes do I make?
I don't know. I can't really... Well, you describe it very well, actually, so... I think...
It comes from being around a lot of people.
It's not like Kit ever gets drunk.
I think I would say it's sort of the same mistakes that any kind of inexperienced person makes when describing things. They tend to describe them in sort of an idealized way.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that there's an ideal to drunkenness, but there is like a cultural accepted, these are the things that happen when you're drunk. I think the biggest mistake that an inexperienced person makes when describing something that they don't have experience with, is describing things very broadly and leaving out the descriptive details that actually make it a life sort of relatable to life experience.
Right.
I mean, one of the things that I learned very early on from my friends who were drinking was that if you lay down on your bed after a night of drinking and looked up at the ceiling and the ceiling was spinning, you were going to throw up.
Oh yeah, no, that's the bed spins.
And
the bed spins are an integral part of being drunk.
Bed spins is a big thing, but it's never in the popular culture. I've been out of the loop in college drinking movies for a while, so people may have mentioned it, but it's one of those things where if you talk to anybody who drinks, they say, "Oh yeah, bed spins is a thing."
Yeah.
But you will rarely read about it or hear about it or see it in movies. I mean, that's one of my classic examples of, when I describe drinking and I want to describe someone who's drunk to excess, you go into this thing, oh, the room's spinning a certain way, and then his stomach started to lurch and blah blah blah, and anyone who's been that drunk immediately is like, oh, that's bed spins, I hate that.
Yeah.
And they know it. So that in general applies to a lot of things, which is why when I talk to people say what should they do to write better adult fiction, I say go out and get experience, because anybody can sort of recite your high school health class lesson as far as how things fit together, but it's those little details that happen when you're actually having an experience that you remember and you share with people, and either it's something unique to you, which is then a really interesting detail, or it's something where everybody says, oh God, I've had that happen, I hate when that happens, and then people can relate to it.
Like the very first time I got drunk, I remember I was on my friend's bunk bed in his college dorm room, and over on his wall he had this tapestry with like a big sun face in the middle.
Oh no.
And I had a box of Nilla wafers, and I was trying to throw the Nilla wafers and hit the sun, and I noticed as I was throwing them, and I'm like, oh, I'm sort of going about 30 degrees wide to the right, so I'm like, hold on, let me aim for his computer, which is 30 degrees over left, and I'm gonna try and hit that, and then bam, I hit the sun dead on in the middle, and I'm like, all right, drunken geometry, it works. And I was so proud of myself.
Wow.
Unsheathed does not endorse underage drinking. In fact, if you're underage, you shouldn't be in here. Well, if you're between 19 and 20. What was the inspiration for Out of Position? I know some of this story, but I don't know how much you want to tell.
Yeah, I mean, basically I've told this story a bunch of times. It was a flash of the final scene of the segment called In Between from the first novel, and it just sort of hit me, and I was like, oh, it's these two characters. And then I wanted to write a short story about how those two characters got to that point, and that was the one that as I've mentioned before, I submitted it to Heat, and they turned it down. They said it was not quite the right style they were looking for, or they had too much gay story or whatever, and so it just sort of was like, okay, cool, well, I still really like the story, and I think there's more that I can do with these characters, and so I wrote a second story. I posted In Between, I think, only on my live journal.
Yeah.
I didn't post it to a story site, and people seem to really like it, so...
And now here you are, 6 years later.
And now it's 6 years later, and I'm still writing about those two characters who appeared to me one day as I was stepping out of the shower or something. I don't know what sparked it, but it was just
cute
stuff.
Naked gay foxes.
Yeah, there you go.
When you both have ideas for a part of a story, but you aren't there yet, do you write them down or remember them? I have a little notebook that I jot down half-full ideas from, and I've written some of them as actual stories, not all of them.
Yeah, I have my little notebook too. One of the interesting pieces of writing advice that I'm not sure if I completely believe it, but I kind of sort of do, was from Stephen Donaldson.
Mm-hmm.
And it was not, contrary to what you might think, write 2 million words about a completely unlikable person. It was, when you one thing is not enough to make a story. Two things makes a story.
Right.
And so if I have just one idea where I think, oh, this would be kind of cool, I always sort of wait till I have something else to play off of it. If it's a character interaction, then it needs some kind of setting or some other force acting in opposition to it, or some other thing to make it a more interesting story. And if it's kind of like a plot, like, I mean, the whole thing with Dev and Lee was that it was two things. It was the two characters acting against each other, and each of them had very, very strong motivations, and it was how that story would play out that really intrigued me.
Iridescent Dragon says about your story about getting the inspiration. He's like, wow, that's like J.K. Rowling just getting inspiration, like just on the train out of the blue. It's
Right.
like, yeah, I mean, that's the big secret. When people say, oh, like, where did you come up with the idea for these stories? Like, pretty much anyone will tell you, like, I just did. Like,
Yeah.
I can't tell you where I got the idea for most of what I write.
Yeah.
I mean, it just sort of happens.
Which is why you should always carry a notebook around, and if you get an idea that you like, write it down. One of my writing instructors said, ideas are cheap. It's and in fact, along those lines, encourage people to share their ideas for stories with other writers, because you can also have, like, KM and I could both start, and we've done this actually, start with the same idea for a story, and we write two totally different stories out of it.
Yeah, there was one time I remember I wrote a story. It's actually my story, I think it's Pretty Please is the name of it, where we were on our way home from a dance club one night, and there was like some sign out the window that I commented on, and I made it like naughty and furry somehow, and
Oh, it
Kyell
was the Dog Hotel.
yeah, that was it, and I made some comment about that, and Kyell was like, you should like write that as a story, and I was like, okay, and then I did. Like, that's, have the two of us consider collaborating writing together on a sort of writing project? Yes.
Yes. Awesome.
I have more Raylan stories coming, don't worry. Do we find that somebody drawing an image of a character helps you figure them out more? Sometimes?
It helps, actually.
Yeah.
It helps to have the character there. Like, I have a couple pictures of the characters that I'm writing about up on my office.
Amusingly, as you said that, my desktop background changed to a picture of Raylan.
Awesome.
Which is very, very indicative.
All
Have you
right.
ever found yourself doing something and thinking, this is just what character name here would do?
I think we should save that one.
Yeah, that is a good one. I assume you can draw. I can't.
No, that's what this is a great fandom for.
Yes, we can pay other people to draw for us.
Exactly.
Alright, well, thank you for listening, everyone, and for coming by to see us again. We should have another one of these in a couple of weeks.
Yep, and once I get the other computer back, I'll start looking at rebroadcasting the earlier episodes on the stream. Thank you guys for coming. I'm Kyell Gold.
I am Cam Hirosaki.
Good night, and always keep writing.